Good afternoon. I'd like to thank everyone for coming out tonight. At this time, I'd like to call the April 9th Planning Board meeting to order. May I ask everyone to stand with us for the Pledge of Allegiance, moment of silence. Pledge of Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Do any members have any conflict of interest with respect to any of the items on the agenda tonight? All right. I believe we have a quorum with 4 people. Are there any changes to tonight's agenda? All right, hearing none, I'll entertain a motion for approval of the agenda as presented. Move to approve. We have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, agenda's approved. Are there any changes to the March 12th meeting minutes? Okay, hearing none, I'll entertain a motion for approval of the minutes of the March 12th meeting as they were presented.
I move to approve.
Motion, we have a second?
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Minutes are approved. Is there any old business we need to address? I think we do have the one item of
Meeting time.
the meeting time change. So how do you want to handle that? Do we just,
It's going to start from, we're going to start instead of at 7, start at 6.
do we just vote on that now, or?
I move to approve.
All right.
To approve?
All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Motion passes to change the meeting time from 7 to 6. All right, new business. PB item number 1907, Currituck County Tax Amendment Dune Protection, request to amend the Unified Development Ordinance, Chapter 7 and 10 to provide dune protection standards. And staff,
Yep.
take it away.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The county is submitting a text amendment to the ordinance to amend Chapter 7, the Environmental Protection Standards chapter, as well as Chapter 10, Definitions and Measurement, to strengthen protection of the oceanfront or the ocean shoreline dune system and establish setbacks for oceanfront accessory structures and uses. Just a little bit of background. Coastal development in Currituck County is regulated by the state of North Carolina through CAMA, and that regulates development along the oceanfront shoreline through setbacks and development standards. CAMA setbacks are based on, and I'll go here to this little picture. So you can, CAMA setbacks are based on the erosion rate in the area. Generally speaking, in Currituck County, our erosion rates go from 2 feet per year, which all of the paved road area of Corolla is 2 feet per year, to, I believe it's 8 feet per year, or 7.5 or 8 feet per year. So those setback factors are used to determine how far back from the first line a principal structure would be placed, a dwelling would be placed, and they're also based on size of structure. Structures that are less than 5,000 square feet, the erosion rate setback is the erosion rate times 30 feet. So generally, it's a 60-foot setback for those principal structures. Just making sure you understood, because I was a little, we good on that? Okay. All right. And so, but CAMA does allow certain things within 60 feet of the first line. Accessory structures like pools, gazebos, sheds, walkways, decking, up to 500 square feet of decking. So the reason for the proposed text amendment is that we've been seeing some dune excavation within 60 feet of the first line and within the frontal or the primary dune. And I have some pictures here to just kind of show you just some pictures of pool development on the ocean front. And these pictures were taken in the past 2 years. And then this picture was taken fairly recently, within the past year, but the structure and the pool was built many years ago, probably somewhere in the mid-90s. And then this is a picture that shows like a pool that was put in the dune, and then the dune was rebuilt and sprigged on the ocean front. So just to kind of give an idea where we're talking. So the county recognizes the importance of maintaining a healthy dune system because it serves as a protective barrier between the ocean and our assets, our development. And this ordinance will establish greater protection to the dune system and encourage responsible development and minimize impacts to the dune system. I'm going to skip over in your memo to the proposed ordinance. We're actually proposing a new section in Chapter 7 called Protection of Dune System. The purpose is to limit the impacts of development on or near frontal and primary dunes. The regulations limit structures and activities within the dune system to assist with dune system preservation and protective and aesthetic value. The standards, the applicability, the standards are applied to development and excavation on or near primary and frontal dunes. Just a note on a primary and a frontal dune. I'm going to go back to the very first picture here. So a frontal dune is the first mound of sand when you're moving from the ocean west. That's your frontal dune. So it doesn't matter how high that is, that's your frontal dune. A primary dune is a dune that has to be of a certain elevation to be considered a primary dune. Generally, that's the base flood elevation from a flood map. We just went through a flood map change. So the elevations of a primary dune are the base flood plus 6 feet. So a lot of Corolla now is like a 16-foot high dune would be a primary dune. And if that was the first dune, it would be a frontal primary dune. So that's what we're protecting here. The standards that are proposed are on development located on a track or a lot or track containing a frontal or primary dune. Excavating, degrading, or disturbing a frontal or primary dune for any purpose other than those development types permitted by this ordinance is prohibited. And then any areas that disturb vegetation should be immediately stabilized and replanted. In the setbacks section, we can continue to just use the CAMA setbacks for principal structures as they're set out in the North Carolina Administrative Code. That's the erosion rate times, or 30 times the erosion rate for structures less than 5,000 square feet. This is kind of one of the big provision of this proposed text amendment. It's accessory structures or uses that are exempt from the CAMA setback criteria shall not be located within 60 feet of the first line of stable natural vegetation and shall not be located on a frontal dune or a primary frontal dune. This shall include decks, gazebos, sheds, pools, and any other structure that meets the exception criteria established in the administrative code. We do carve out an exception for dune walkovers and also one dune deck or gazebo of 200 square feet in area, provided it is no closer than 15 feet to that first line of stable natural vegetation. We also include a provision for existing structures. Existing structures that do not meet this setback criteria shall be regulated in accordance with the standards applicable to nonconforming structures established in Chapter 8. And then in Chapter 10, we've included some definitions of dunes and dune walkovers, so we can interpret and enforce the ordinance if it's adopted. So dune system, frontal dune, primary dune, dune walkover access, improved and unimproved, and first line of stable natural vegetation. Definitions are laid out. I just want to go back to the new proposed section 7.8 and 7.8.3 standards. This is at the bottom of page 3 of 5 of your proposed text amendment. Minimum setbacks. Number 2, accessory structures or uses that are exempt from CAMA setback criteria shall not be located within 60 feet. And I have a couple of site plans to kind of illustrate that for you. So these are 2 lots on Lighthouse Drive in Whalehead subdivision. They were built in the past, I believe, 2 years. The green line there is the first line of stable natural vegetation. The red line is the 60-foot setback. So under this ordinance, the pool and any structures that aren't a walkway or a 200-square-foot gazebo or dune deck would not be permitted within that 60 feet. And then here's just another site plan that was also a new construction in the past couple of years. You see the green first line of stable natural vegetation, and the red is the 60-foot setback line. This particular property would comply with the ordinance. So in order to, or when you're considering a text amendment, there's some review standards in the ordinance that you may consider. It doesn't have to meet all the factors, but there are factors in your memo and your staff report that you can consider when determining whether or not to adopt or modify this or deny this amendment. Also, you should adopt a statement of consistency and reasonableness. And staff recommends approval of the text amendment because it's consistent with the 2006 land use plan, specifically Goal 1 and Goal 6. Goal 1, to protect and conserve the area's natural beauty and coastal resources, and Goal 6, to preserve critical natural areas as the source of biological diversity and productivity of the county's ocean and estuarine environments. Staff also recommends approval because it's consistent with policy ES7 of the land use plan. Maritime forests and sand dunes shall receive a high level of environmental protection and special consideration when reviewing public and private sector development proposals in Currituck County. Staff also recommends approval because the request is reasonable and in the public interest because it provides greater protection to the public health, safety, and general welfare by increasing protection of the oceanfront dune system. It improves conservation of the natural resources and environmental quality of the county through increased dune protection and additional setback requirements for accessory structures, and it improves protection of development and residents from flooding and other natural hazards through increased dune protection and additional setback requirements for accessory structures. That concludes my presentation.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Turner. Are there any questions for staff at this time?
And let me clarify, this came out of a general concern over our beaches and over the protection that we give them. Jenny, Ms. Turner noted earlier that this we were directed by the Board of Commissioners at their retreat. Due to the concern, we have had the change in the flood maps. We're seeing all these potential environmental issues, and we understand the protective nature of dunes. And this is probably one of several different things we're looking at as a county over the next year.
we are underway to get an engineering study to just kind of gauge the health of our beaches and where we are. So this is not a standalone thing, but it's also something that we're looking at county as a county, is just the protective quality of the dunes, making sure we protect that resource of the beach, and making sure our beach is healthy and functioning the way we want it to.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any questions for staff members?
Well, I guess they say, do I have to talk into this?
And make sure the green light's on.
The green light's
You're
on.
good.
When I read here that the building structure less than 5,000 square feet requires a minimum setback of 60 feet or 30 times the shoreline erosion rate, whichever is greater, are we looking at, I mean, because the erosion rate changes from different locations, could the 60 feet be, which would be more in different locations? So you said 2 foot per year. So that we're still looking at 60 feet.
60 feet is the minimum.
So 60 feet's a minimum, or as I was reading, so it's still 60 feet for a 5,000 square foot structure.
Well, for 5,000 to 10,000, it's 60 times the erosion rate, which jumps to 120. If you're less than 5,000 square feet, it's 30 times the erosion rate. So it's 60.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah, well, 60 if you're in a 2 feet per year erosion rate. We do have areas in the off-road area that have a higher erosion rate.
Okay. So I was just wondering how that would affect different locations.
Generally, like in the off-road area where we have some higher erosion rates, your houses will be set back farther because of that.
Right.
And then your accessory structures generally will too.
We were talking in the work session. I was just curious how the insurance, like if that affects the insurance rate of these homes, with them being non-conformity, how that affects their accessories. And you were saying that you don't insure pools?
My understanding is you can insure pools. I was going to ask Willow, do you know?
As far as other structures, it depends on if it's a homeowner's policy or dwelling policy. Under a homeowner policy, there could be coverage on a pool as another structure.
Okay. There could be coverage.
So potentially, there are 108 pools in 78 are in the existing setback. So 78 of those could be affected.
That information is on Whalehead subdivision only.
Oh,
So it's the 150, there were 150 oceanfront lots in Whalehead subdivision. Of those 150, 108 of those lots have pools, and of those 108 pools, 78 are located either partially or entirely within the 60-foot setback.
okay.
Just to give you a few more statistics, we did grab some data from our GIS analyst, Harry Lee. We have just under 1,000 oceanfront lots. 992 is the best data we have here in Currituck County. Of those, about 270 are vacant or undeveloped at this time. So you could be potentially, this amendment could potentially impact development on that, on a quarter of the oceanfront lots. That's just something to consider. And this is going to impact certain neighborhoods more than others. Whalehead subdivision those are the site plans that Jenny showed earlier, and that it would have an impact on that. But on some of the other neighborhoods that were developed differently, that have their beaches and their oceanfront and shared open space, it's not going to have an impact, a big impact on their building area on their lots.
of the bulk of the ones that are going to be affected are in Whalehead?
Not necessarily. Not necessarily. Pine Island has some areas where they may be affected by it. There are areas where Pine Island has open space between their lots in the ocean that may not be as affected by it. Corolla Light also has open space. Most of Ocean Sands has open space between their oceanfront lots and the ocean. Buck Island also has some open space on the oceanfront. Villages at Ocean Hill would definitely be impacted by this. That one house that I showed you with the pool on the oceanfront was Villages at Ocean Hill, which is that last subdivision before you hit the four-wheel drive beach. Ocean Hill, which is just south of Villages at Ocean Hill. Similar situation, they don't have open space between their lots and the ocean. Corolla Village, you know, the same. They're similar to the Whalehead lots. Corolla Light definitely has some open space in there. Trying to think, going south. I already said Buck Island. Spindrift
Okay.
would be affected.
Have those subdivisions been notified too of this possible amendment? Those homeowners, those stakeholders that are homeowners along those on the ocean front, or is it only Whalehead owners that know of this amendment?
Right. So the ordinance was sent out to our contractor listserv.
Okay.
Or this staff report was sent out to the contractor listserv last week, I believe.
Yes.
And other than that, don't know of any other public outreach.
This, like I said, this came out of discussion at the Board of Commissioners retreat, and this is a public process where we're taking it through right now. We have a time for the public to give input here. There's also the public hearing with the Board of Commissioners. A conversation today, I think the Board of Commissioners would be open to having a meeting of the stakeholders. It was just, like I said, it was a pretty direct. We got pretty specific direction on this text amendment out of the retreat. Okay. And typically, when we get that, we take it through the process. Now, we have in the past gone out to the different communities when there's an issue and maybe we're trying to figure out the best way forward, but this was a very specific direction that we received.
Have the people who have any upcoming projects been notified? Like anybody who has permits for their permits for their pools, and anybody who's in that area?
If they've received a permit for their pool as of effective date of this ordinance, they would be grandfathered in. They would be allowed to construct their pool. It would be anything submitted after the effective date. And if this amendment tracks and does get approved, the Board of Commissioners, you can recommend an effective date. The Board of Commissioners can then set an effective date of further down the road. Let's say, August 1st. I'm just throwing it out there, and that would give us time to notify everyone, to get everybody on that, that this has changed, and that new things, that new development activity would have to adhere to these new standards. So that would be how we would handle that.
Any other questions? You mentioned the study. You were going to have an engineer look into the health of the beach. Do you know a time frame on when that may occur?
I do not. This was something that we had been talking about at the Board of Commissioners and staff over the last few months, and it's through the assistant county managers doing that, and who we mentioned that briefly today. So I don't have that, but I can get that information to you.
Okay. I was just wondering if we could coincide it with some of this stuff tonight. All right. Thank you. Anything else for staff?
Does that change the real estate value the house, over here goes in, can get a pool, but, some lots can, some lots can't. I guess that would change the real estate value.
I'm not an appraiser. I can make my best guess that it may affect desirability as far as a rental program or even just owning your own home. But I can't speak to it. Definitively would affect the real estate value, but perhaps definitely desirability.
Yeah.
All right. Anything else? Good. All right. Well, we will open the floor for public comment. Looks like we have 3 people signed up. Number 1 is Willow Kelly.
Good evening, everyone. How are you doing? Thank you, Chairman Balance, for allowing me to come and speak to you this evening. My name is Willow Kelly. I am the Executive Officer with the Outer Banks Association of Realtors. Formerly, for the past year, I've been with just the Association of Realtors, but for almost 13 years, I was the Government Affairs Liaison Consultant to both the Outer Banks Home Builders Association and the Outer Banks Association of Realtors. And I say that because in my past life, I attended a lot of meetings. People would ask me what I do. I'd say, well, I just go to a lot of meetings. That's planning board meetings, town council meetings, commission meetings, et cetera. And in 2013, this issue was brought up before the Duck Planning Board, Duck Town Council, in which the town of Duck did adopt an ordinance similar to what is being proposed here. I did call Ms. Turner about this earlier today because I got the packet. And in reviewing the packet, et cetera, I had several questions and just wanted to look and see how this compared with what was being discussed in Duck 6 years ago. Also, the Coastal Resources Commission did look at what is allowed within the setback, the CAMA setback. And as you mentioned, Ms. Krause, oceanfront setbacks changed actually in 2009, I believe it was, when commercial setbacks then followed the residential setbacks, and there was the phased-in approach. Residential structures prior to 2009 were all within a 60-foot setback of the first line of stable natural vegetation. After the CRC adopted new language, it then became a graduated scale, so a house up to 4,999 square feet was 30 times the erosion rate. Over that, the structures being built today, the larger, over 5,000 square feet to just under 10, then were 60 times the erosion rate, et cetera, et cetera. Where it's very concerning here to me and what has been proposed, and I'm just going to read an email that I sent to Ms. Turner earlier, was that, thanks for speaking with me about the proposed UDO text amendment regarding setbacks for oceanfront accessory structures. As we discussed, Duck, the town of Duck, adopted a similar ordinance in 2013 that restricts accessory structures within 30 feet of the first line of stable natural vegetation, much less restrictive than the proposed Currituck amendment. You shared that on Lighthouse Drive alone, there are 150 lots, of which 108 have pools. Of the 108 pools, 78 of those pools, 72% of the total, are located entirely or within the 60-foot setback from the first line of stable natural vegetation. How many others exist along the ocean front in Currituck that would not be able to be built back if more than 50% damaged, because they would just become non-conforming structures, not grandfathered structures with regards to, they would still have to meet the non-conforming rules. So the packet available to the public did not include how many non-conformities would exist if this ordinance was passed. The ordinance prohibits not only pools, but also decks, gazebos, sheds, et cetera. And when you brought up insurance, Ms. Krause, with regards to accessory structures on a homeowner's policy, you would have, with a wind policy, homeowner's policy coverage on that accessory structure, the shed, et cetera, but under a flood insurance policy, any type of bulkheading, et cetera, walkway would not be covered. So there's different coverage for different policies. What was discussed, I remember, in Duck was they brought about kind of a visual showing the entire oceanfront and where there were structures that actually existed within 10, 20, 30, and 40 feet from the first line of stable natural vegetation. I think that would be good in moving forward in perhaps another meeting to actually show where structures exist, how many would be non-conforming. I think it's very important to the discussion to have a clear understanding of how many non-conformities would be created with this and what the impact would be, not only to market value, tax value. There certainly would be an impact to tax value when you have a structure with a pool, without a pool, and not only to mention the marketability of that property. All vacationers want a pool. On the ocean front, you figure the ocean's right there. You can just walk and put your feet in the water, and you got water right there. However, we know with rip currents and whatnot, red flags are flying. You can't go in the ocean. People like to have that option with the children right in the back in the pool, et cetera, et cetera. So during this conversation, I did take note of this in looking back at emails and other notes I had on that conversation in Duck. Engineered pools seem to be the greatest concern. Engineered pools, I had no idea that engineered pools were constructed in the manner of which they were constructed, and that caused great concern after Superstorm Sandy with the erosion and escarpment that took place in Duck, where those engineered pools where pilings were sunk 15 feet, there was just tremendous escarpment and erosion. I mean, just undermined the pool completely, but the structure was still standing. The pool was sitting on top of the structure, and it almost got all the way up to the house. So I think that is something that we probably should have further discussion about. Due to the impact this amendment may have on existing structures, I feel the issue warrants a meeting of those stakeholders, as you referred to in Corolla, to more closely determine where the problem lies and what the goal would be of an ordinance amendment. The Coastal Resources Commission is actually having their meetings here next week, next Wednesday and Thursday. On Thursday, I'm actually part of a panel discussion on coastal resiliency. That's at 11 o'clock on Thursday. They also offer a public comment period, and I'll have to look at whether it's on Wednesday or Thursday. I think it's Wednesday, there towards the afternoon. There's actually a period where you can come and comment, and maybe this is a topic of discussion that we all should be having. So I would like to thank you for allowing me to comment on this issue, and I am available in my office at any time for questions, and I would like to be kept in the loop if a meeting is scheduled, perhaps of stakeholders, because I'm sure my property management folks would like to be aware of this, and as well as inform their property owners. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, well, did anyone have any questions for Ms. Kelly?
She answered a few.
Okay. We have Dave Stormont.
Well, good evening. Thank you for allowing me an opportunity to speak. I'm a builder, 30 years here on the Outer Banks, and of the 78 whalehead properties that are containing pools, I've constructed 10 of those just on Lighthouse Drive. So this is an issue that my clients and myself are very interested in. I got the notice last week, read it very briefly, could see that this would definitely have a significant financial impact on my client base. The desirability of a home with a pool on the oceanfront has clearly proven itself to be more advantageous with a pool than without a pool. So the financial impact of any future development, if pools were not allowed anymore because they couldn't fit into the 60-foot setback, but they're fitting into the 30, would definitely have a financial impact. Insurance questions, Ms. Kelly did a great job giving you all some answers on that. The science behind the ordinance is what caught my eye, Ms. Turner. Where is it coming from? First line of vegetation starts at 0 and would come back 30 feet to where the accessory structures can start to be built. First line of vegetation is always at a point, at least in my experience, where the dune is rising and we're out of the tidal area. First line of vegetation is a point of strength for the frontal dune. 30 feet back from that is where these accessory structures begin to be built. I'm unaware of any frontal dune damage occurring from the west. Frontal dune damage that I have incurred and experienced has always been from the east. And my oceanfront clients have been very quick to sign up for the county's beach push efforts that come after major storms. So I'm here as a builder concerned about the homes that I've built and the homes that I may have an opportunity to build, and would just like to request that perhaps this issue not be put in a drawer and sent away, but at least be tabled for a while so that the science can be brought forward and all of the stakeholders can gather in the same place and have discussions on where are the problems and where are the problems not. And if we've got problems, let's fix the problems, but let's not just do a carte blanche, one-size-fits-all ordinance restriction, which may or may not affect a particular property owner. The non-conformity issue in the case of major damage is very concerning. Think of yourself as the homeowner, and now you can't put your pool back. So that affects the marketability and the rentability of your property. Ms. Kelly did a great job on the insurance side, so I don't need to go down that road. So you all have any questions of a guy who's built these structures?
Any questions?
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Mr. Jay Overton?
Good evening. I too would like to thank y'all for allowing us to speak. My name is Jay Overton. I'm with firm of Albemarle and Associates. I'm a surveyor and engineer, and I'm also the legislative chairman for the Outer Banks Home Builders Association. This, as was mentioned, that was sent out last week, was the first time that we got wind of this proposed dune protection ordinance. And what we're considering is more far-reaching than what's just in these couple of pages here. I mean, we live in a very fragile environment, and things that we do reactively one way oftentimes create issues in another way. And I think it would be good for our community if we were able to table this matter, have the opportunity to bring all the stakeholders together, get input, think through it, talk about it. Most importantly, what is the genesis of the issue? What I'm gleaning is that we've had some destruction of our primary and our frontal dunes that has brought this about. If you, which I think it's in your package, and it's on page 21, page 21, where it speaks in there about the exceptions, that these items that can be placed within the 60 feet. If you look down under number 9, beneath that it says, in all cases this development shall be permitted only if it is landward of the vegetated line or static vegetation line, whichever is applicable, involves no alteration or removal of the primary or frontal dunes which would compromise the integrity of the dune as it protects the landform of the dune vegetation. This is CAMA's rules. So even though there's an exception in there that you can put these items within that 60 feet, their major functionality is to protect our coastal and our estuarine waters. When this was developed back in the late 70s, this was one of the things that was foremost in their duties and their responsibilities. What we're saying within our text amendment, I feel like in one respect is further enforcing this and reinforcing it, saying we don't want this to happen. But when you also read under in our text amendment, and we're looking at under item 2 of the minimum setbacks, we go a step further where we just prohibit these exemptions. And what is the underlying reason for doing that? Some of the pictures that Jenny was showing where we've got dunes being destroyed, that's something that we don't want to see. None of us want to see that happen within our environment. But is that an enforcement issue? where we've got people out there who are not following the rules, and we need to enforce the rules, or do we need to say you can't do it? I mean, it would almost be like being out here on the bypass, and we don't want people going 70 miles an hour, and we're not ticketing them, but we're going to lower the speed limit to 25, hoping that no one's ever going to go 70. May not be a great analogy, but you know that's what what I'm seeing with this. If we've got some issues, then we certainly need to address them. I've got sons and grandsons and granddaughters that I want them to be able to enjoy the Outer Banks just like I've grown up enjoying it. And if we've got things like this that are occurring, then we need to be addressing them. But I don't want them to lose some of the other enjoyments that come because of certain people not following the rules. Those that are following the rules aren't able to have those same levels of enjoyment. So again, I ask that we not move this forward, that we embark on some stakeholder meetings, some discussions where we can generally all come together, talk about the pluses and minuses that we see, and come to consensus on how we can positively affect our community in this oceanfront area. And I will gladly be a part of any discussions. I've been here in Currituck and the Outer Banks and Tidewater since the late 70s. I've done beach nourishment projects for the Corps of Engineers. I've done beach studies. I've lived around the ocean and the processes that we have within the coastal community for over 40 years. And it is a very dynamic environment that we have. But that's why we love living here. We enjoy that. Thank you all for the time tonight. If you have any questions, I'll try to answer them best I can.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions?
No.
I do.
Okay.
The photos that you put up there, you said they were within, of the homes that had those. Are these actively being built right now? Are the pools already in and landscaping was done on? They've already been finished. So are there any current examples of violations going on where there isn't? These are not violations. Okay.
That's just an example
It's just an example of them, of
what
what's,
construction looks like.
of what the construction looks like. So this would change,
That would not be allowed.
that would not be allowed. Okay.
But this would not be allowed because the ordinance is just saying no in this area,
No in this.
where we may have an area that doesn't have this type of setting and they still would not be able to do it. In this particular photograph I'm looking at, that's where I'm saying we need to come together and we need to understand what we are trying to protect. If what's in the ordinance and what's in CAMA needs more refinement or more definition, and we're bringing forth more definition of CAMA's rules and regulation within our ordinance that would preclude something like this from occurring, then we're looking at protecting our dune system, which is what we're talking about. In my way of thinking, just to wholesale say we're not going to have anything allowed within the 60 feet. If you've got the backside of a dune that's at 25 feet and you've got another 35 feet that's flat and it's at the same level as everything naturally, then that person's not able to enjoy that. And the other aspect we were talking a while ago about the effective date, and Lori was correct, whatever effective date if somebody's got a permit, but as a homeowner, if you're able to get a permit today, realizing that this ordinance as it's written now becomes effective 2 months from now, and I spend the money for my pool, and then if I have any type of damage that occurs over the next year, and it's more than 50%, then I couldn't replace that pool. So, you know, there's some ongoing dynamic things here that needing to think through all of the various aspects of it. So, again, that's why I ask more time that we can all come together and air these things and make sure we truly are doing what's best for the entire community and for our coastal environment. Thank you.
right, well, that's all we have signed up. Is there anyone else that wishes to speak on this here tonight? All right. We will close the public comment. Are there any questions or discussions among us? I will say I have a hard time with telling the few people that don't have pools that may have intended to build one that they now can't build in that 60-foot. When there's many of them that already exist. Also, the number of non-conforming uses it would create. I do think that we should probably consider tabling it to get some more stakeholders from the area involved and see what our surrounding areas ordinance are. Such as I know a couple of times tonight the ordinance in Duck has been mentioned. Kind of see what we compare to other areas as well as the insurance. That's about the only discussion I have at the moment.
I feel the same way. I think we need to slow this down a little bit.
Well, there's a
And
lot
get
of
more
unknowns.
information.
Maybe just get more information.
Get a better grasp on how many houses it's actually going to affect moving forward. If there's
But the protection of the dunes is very important. It is something that is very important.
all right.
Oh,
No, go ahead.
are there examples of existing pools where they had done, the excavation on the east side, I mean the west side,
Right.
that it affected how the west side, the east side, whether did it stay healthy? Did it break down? What happened to the other side? I mean, but that was built. Really, was there a dune there before? There was.
Right.
And I can
But-
show you aerial photography from
I know what you mean to see an example of the finished product. Because what we've seen is during construction, and we all know that's not necessarily what it looks like when it's done. As you mentioned, they do come back and backfill and plant bushes and build walls.
So possibly also, even if this went through, just say that there were no questions that went through. Dunes change. You're going to constantly be shifting who's complying and not complying. There's going to be inspections after every storm. How's that going to work? Because the dunes do change, so some houses that may comply with their pool area may not comply after a storm or.
Yeah, it's the same as with these structures. This house that you see right here does not comply with CAMA standards now. So it's just a matter of at the time, if work needs to be done to those structures, then we'll evaluate them then.
And this one was probably built before CAMA standards, no?
No.
It was probably built when the
Are there
dune
more
was a
houses
long
like
ways
this?
out
Are
in
there-
front.
are there
And
several
this
more?
is like I said before. This is an extreme, and I'm only aware of maybe 2 or 3 pools that have breached, where the dune has breached. One's in Spindrift, one's here in Villages at Ocean Hill. I think there's another one at Villages at Ocean Hill that's breached the dune. So this is definitely like a worst case scenario. This house was built a long time ago. It's just an example of, the location of the pool. Where do you build the dune?
But this house wouldn't even be allowed to be built there now, just with the standards that exist now, correct?
Correct. Yes, it would have to be set back farther.
Okay.
And I believe, as Mr. Overton alluded to, even though structures are allowed to be built in that 60-foot, you're not allowed to do anything that would compromise the integrity of the dune itself. So in some cases, it could be a code enforcement issue that people are compromising a little farther than they should. As well, I think the grass plays an effect. You're not allowed to disturb the grass. Was there any other discussion? All right. Hearing none, I'll open the floor for a motion.
To table?
Yes.
Yeah.
I second the motion to slow it down to table it. Juanita made the motion?
I made a motion to
So-
table it.
Okay, are we tabling it
Oh,
to
I'm sorry.
allow them some time to have a stakeholder meeting? How would you want to?
I think that it would be a good idea to allow for the stakeholders to at least know a little bit more about this, and see how many more can be affected. The insurance was another question. I think just allow more time to understand what the total effect would be should we approve this as it stands.
The number of homes that would become non-conforming, insurance, the possibility of allowing structures in some of it, but possibly not all.
Right, and there could be, a discussion that if it's not 60, it could be
Include some of
30.
the stakeholders and property owners,
Yes.
Home Builders Association, et cetera. Okay. Well, we have a motion to include all of that, if you have that. And we have a second?
I second.
Sogendorf seconds. Any further discussion? Just like to clarify, because I know we don't want it to be too confusing for you. We're just going to motion to table it. Maybe some direction on how long. Do we just table it to the next meeting, or do we a later date?
It's up to you. Do you want it to be brought back, this information?
Your preference, how long do you think it might take you to
I think
get
not in
satisfied?
30 days is enough.
Include the stakeholders, have them a little better informed.
What is it?
30
Allow-
days would
allow
be
them some
very,
time to
very
get some
limited
info.
time.
But
I will tell you that 30 days would, at this point with the
So,
project's
60
planning staff
days.
have, okay, 60
the
days.
next meeting, but
So
not the next meeting, but the next one.
the June meeting? Okay,
Is that okay?
works for,
Fine by me.
Okay. And to get some answers to some of the questions the stakeholders have. What if we can come to some sort of compromise there so everybody's happy? All right, we have a motion, we have a second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Hearing none, motion passes. All right, next item, we have announcements. Any announcements tonight? Anyone? Would like to welcome our 2 new members. Thank you for serving on the board.
Thank you.
All right. Open the floor for a motion to adjourn.
A motion.
Close it.
All right, second?
I second.
All right, motion passes, we're adjourned.